Thinking of insulating your underfloor? Awesome. But maybe you're not quite sure if you should buy fiberglass batts or maybe invest a little more for polyester rolls. Hi, I'm Maurice Baynett. I'm Technical Director at EcoMaster. In this video, we're going to compare two common underfloor insulation products in side-by-side testing. In one corner, we have these purpose-made R2.5 underfloor insulation glass fibre batts. In the other corner, we have R2.5 polyester rolls. Before we get going, let's take a look at what's in these products. The glass fibre batts are made up of tiny little glass fibres glued together. They say that up to 80% recycled glass. We're not sure what the minimum recycled percentage is. The polyester rolls use long plastic fibres that are aligned and heat bonded together. They make use of recycled plastic bottles. They also have up to 80% recycled fibres and guarantee to have a minimum of 40% recycled fibres. And now let's see how they stack up side by side in a range of scientifically formulated, strictly controlled experiments. Whoops. Well, that was a lot of fun, but we completely forgot about the science. You can draw your own conclusions from those tests. On a more serious note, what we actually want to do is to compare these products in a real-life situation. Well, at least a simulated real-life situation. For this purpose, and for the ease of filming, we've prepared a simulated typical Melbourne underfloor. You know, product-specific installation videos are very often shot in floors that you can stand up under and with perfectly spaced joists for the specific product. This is simply not realistic. Your underfloor is almost certainly not going to be like that. Our simulated floor is more typical of underfloor spaces. How do I know that? Because I've been under so many floors for more than 20 years and I've installed insulation under them in an effective and long-lasting way. So what are the attributes of our simulated floor? Well, one, there is not much clearance. It's reasonably close to the ground. Two, it has some variable joist spacing, and absolutely every underfloor has this. Three, it's long, just like your home is. Our floor is 9 metres from access point to the far end. Pace out your own home. I bet it's more than 9 metres. And four, access point is too small to get a full insulation bag through it. This is typical of access points. Your own underfloor is much more likely to be like this than the idealised one seen in the easy peasy installation videos. How many floors could I actually stand under? Very, very few is the answer, and those tended to be on sloping ground suitable for a billy goat. Now, insulating your underfloor is a simple two-step process. 1, get the insulation to where you need it, and 2, fix it in place so it's held firmly onto the floor. With that in mind, we're going to see the differences between the products with the reality of actually working in house-size restricted space. The real tests include 1, getting the insulation to where it's needed, 2, installing in a standard joist spacing, and that's 430 millimeters between the joists in most of Victoria. And 3, installing smaller joist spacing, as we know these occur in all floors. And 4, fixing the insulation in place. And now, let's take a look at how the products really stack up. Test 1, getting the insulation to where it's needed. In the first test, we started with the fiberglass bats. Before I could start, I had to get suited up with overalls, gloves, goggles and mask as specified on the pack. By the way, if you don't want to choke like I did, it's best to shave off your beard before starting. Getting these bats in place was hard work. Because we couldn't get a full bag of bats to fit, I had to go back and forth, dragging in a couple of bats at a time. That meant having to commando crawl back and forth 5 times to pull in 10 bats. That's 9 meters each way, 9 times, or 81 meters of crawling to cover about 5 square meters of floor. 81 meters of crawling was absolutely exhausting, and by the time I had done that, my goggles were so fogged up I couldn't see to install. By the way, I did have outside help to line up the next 2 bats ready for me to drag in. Next up, we tested loading in the polyester rolls. The very first difference is that I was able to get rid of the overalls, goggles and mask because you don't need any protective gear to work with polyester. Phew, what a relief. It was much easier and faster to load in the 2 polyester rolls. With my trusty external assistant, who lapped the start of the next roll onto the tail of the roll just ended, I was able to pull in both rolls in just one trip. That's enough insulation for 7 square meters of floor by just crawling in once. That's just 9 meters of crawling to cover 7 square meters of floor. I could have drawn in much more insulation. In reality, it's efficient to load up as much as will fit in the available space before you start installing. And I still had the energy and visibility to start installing. So in test 1, getting the insulation to where it's needed, polyester rolls win easily. With the polyester, you don't need all the cumbersome safety gear. With fiberglass bats, you need to stop the little glass fibers breaking off in your skin, getting in your eyes, and of course, in your lungs, which turned out to be the hardest ones to stop. With the polyester rolls, in just one crawl, you can pull in as much insulation as you can fit in the space. The bats required an amazing effort back and forth, crawling to load in enough for just 5 square meters of floor. The next test is to actually install the insulation in an effective way under the floor. This test is in 2 parts. 1 is to install into a standard joist space, and 2 is to install into a narrow joist space. We started with the fiberglass bats. The instructions on the pack advise to friction fit the bats into place. The pack does not mention any other installation procedures. However, the installation video does suggest that for narrower joist spacings, you measure the joist space, cut the bats with a straight edge and knife, on the ground and then lift up over your head to friction fit in place. Both the pack and the video suggest strapping the bats for greater security. The strapping should be 200 millimeters from each end and then one down across the center as well. Installing in standard joist spacing. The standard Melbourne joist spacing is 430 millimeters between the joists. The bats we are testing are 420 millimeters wide. Whilst that's only 10 millimeter gap, it is significant in terms of friction fitting, for air leakage and how effective your underfloor insulation could be, as well as potential rodent access. Friction fitting in place, as described on the pack, was simply not possible. We were left to work out how to install the bats. We decided to strap the bats in place first and then to trim off the end of another bat to use to stuff the gap between the bat we're fitting and the joist. Strapping in place was tricky. The bat wanted to fall on my face and the plastic strapping is surprisingly slippery. The stapler tended to slip off the strapping. Also, it was hard to see if I had actually managed to staple through the strapping. And because I was strapping just one bat, I had to run the strapping along the joist to the next fixing point. My goggles immediately fogged up. Next in the process of installing this single bat was to get another bat and trim some off the end of that I could use to stuff up the 10 millimeter gap. I did not manage to cut straight. My stuffing bits were a bit skew-if, but it was the best I could do in the available space. Next was installing in a narrow joist space. Now, according to the installation video, I should have measured the joist space, crawled 9 meters out from under the floor, cut a bat with a straight edge and a knife and crawled 9 meters all the way back to fit the bat. I decided against that and did my best to trim it in place. This was not easy at all, verging on impossible. I did my best to trim the bat against the joist, knowing that there were no wires in this particular spot. The risk is that the knife runs off the side of the joist and into the wires saddled on the side of the joist. As it happens, my trimming was better than I had expected and the bat friction fitted in place. Strapping was again a challenge. Inspection of my installation showed a rather inelegant result, but more significantly, the main bat was not held onto the floor. There was a gap between the top of the bat and the floor, and my attempt to stuff the gap between the bat and the joist was only partially successful. Next up was the polyester. In this test we used Value Poly, a budget polyester underfloor insulation. Installing in standard joist spacing. The standard joist spacing was very easy because the polyester underfloor insulation is 450 millimeters wide and is made to cover a range of joist spacing from 440 down to 405 millimeters. Stapling the polyester to the lower edge of the joist was also much easier than trying to staple the slippery blue strapping. There simply is never a need to stuff gaps. The lack of goggles made it much easier to work. Installing in a narrow joist space. You always work with the same end of the polyester roll. Simply turn it 90 degrees so that it is perpendicular to the joists, tear it to length, staple in place at the sides onto the joists and staple through a little of the insulation into the floor to ensure it never ever sags. Repeat, ensuring you butt the pieces tightly into each other. The insulation tests were illuminating. The polyester rolls had significant advantages in all circumstances. Fitting to standard joist spacing was much easier with the polyester rolls. Stapling the polyester to the joists holds it firmly against the floor. The Polyester makes it easier to handle any joist spacing as you go. And it's much easier to work without fogged up goggles. So there you have it. Polyester rolls are massively easier to load in under your floor. Polyester rolls are so much easier to fit in all real circumstances. And at the time this video was made, on a square metre basis, Value Poly was actually cheaper than the fiberglass bats. Thinking of insulating your underfloor? I think you know what insulation is going to give you a better, easier and faster job. If you found this video helpful, please hit the like button, subscribe to our YouTube channel and ring the bell so you don't miss a thing. Thanks for watching.